it's very important to realize that this publish a paper, that's a milestone in the research, and you have to head for that when you do research. And every kind of research has to be published. It's also very important to get it published and do the research properly. If you don't do that, you'll not get it published. When you do research, you have to take a lot of decisions. Decisions, especially the first times you're writing a manuscript. So that's why you have to use your co-authors, and I also guess that you have some supervisors to consult. That's very important too. You cannot do research by your own. So it's also very important that you know that it's the manuscript that qualify your paper for publication and not the study you have done it itself. That's why you have to read papers from the journal where you want to publish before you do your manuscript. You have to learn the style from the journal where you want to publish. Discuss the strategy with your co-authors and supervisors before you start writing the manuscript. The target journal is very important. I think that the next speaker will come more into that, but you can Google this website where you can find which journal would be a very good target journal for just your research. It's also important to realize before you start doing a manuscript that you have to organize it. You have to do the typing correctly. You have to do sections. And you don't need to do any layout because each journal has their own layout and you should just follow the guidelines. When you do the manuscript, you have to do a new version every time you edit the manuscript in order not to mix up all your manuscripts you will have through a period. You also have to use a reference management program. That's very important, and there are many kinds of on the market. Then you have to read instructions to the authors from the journal. Every journal do have an instruction to authors. You have to read it carefully. You also have to know guidelines for how to report your study. I'll come back to that. And before you start the research, you have to do a research process. The very first thing you have to do. So the recipe for good research, that's a good research protocol. In that research protocol, there are many different parts of the manuscript which you can put into the manuscript directly when you are going to do that. I'll also come back to that. So in order to find the guideline for your specific study, you can consult this website, equatornetwork.org. You identify which study you have used, and then you consult the specific guideline. Read the guideline carefully. You have to follow the guideline and put that into the manuscript where you can write that the study is reported according to, for instance, the stroke guidelines. The stroke guidelines are for cohort studies. There are consort guidelines for RCTs, SPIRIT for study protocols, PRISMA for systematic reviews, etc. Find all these guidelines, and you have to use the guidelines in order to have transparency in how you report the research. Regarding instructions to authors, every part of the manuscript has to fulfill the criteria of the journal. I see many of my co-workers which have not followed the guidelines. Please do that. Number of words, reference lists, specific paragraphs, tables and figures have all to fulfill the guidelines. Next, the content of the manuscript. you also have to structure this. There are many different parts: the title, abstract, introduction, purpose, materials, methods, statistics, results, discussion, conclusion, perspective, references, and tables and figures. So where should I start when I start writing a manuscript? I think you should start with what you find most stimulating. Do what you want best to do first. And you have a lot of this in your protocol. The research protocol contains a lot of what you need for the manuscript. So it's just a copy and paste. You have the title, you have the introduction part, you have the purpose, you have materials and methods, and you have a reference list. You also have layout for tables and figures if you haven't done a very good protocol. So that is quite easy. Then you could do a list of how you would organize the manuscript, in which order you would like to write it. You can do a Gantt diagram of the project, so you realize that, of course, you have to do statistical analysis of all your data before you can do the results section. And you have to discuss again with your co-authors. You are a team. You cannot do a manuscript yourself, as you cannot do the research yourself. So regarding the title of the paper, it's what identifies your paper. Many readers will only read the title, and if they do not find that interesting, they will skip your paper. And also the reviewers of the paper and the editor will find it might be boring. So read the style of the journal you find your paper is suitable for, and find out which kind of titles they use. Some like a question in the title, and there are several different kinds. Some are more descriptive, as this one. The next one here is the result is giving in the title, no correlation between, etc. And then there's a question mark. Is the usage of these antidepressants associated with patient-reported outcomes following total hip replacement surgery? Kinds of titles. So you have to find what you believe suit your manuscript best. So what about the introduction? That's very important part. If this is not written carefully, most reviewers will not find your study interesting. So do that and get help from your co-authors and supervisors. Is so important that this really tells the story you want to tell. So if the journal do not have a guideline, you have to start presenting the topic only in a few sentences. The next is that you have to describe what is the problem and what do we know today, what is the lack in knowledge, and how would you like to address this in the manuscript. And that is the motivation of the manuscript. Please remember to motivate your study. Next, you will have to include the aim and also often a hypothesis. Regarding the aim, just have to stress that the introduction is not a summary of the whole literature. Do it short, very important, and also use references for all your statements. You cannot do an introduction or discussion without supporting your statements with references. So,
correct me if I'm wrong.
the aim of the study has to be described in detail, very carefully. You must, if you can, use the PICO possibility, where you have the patient intervention, comparison, and outcome in your research question, which is the aim. An example here is from one of my own publication where we have written our primary aim was to evaluate the overall revision risk, and our secondary to study the specific risk for revision of the durability cup design compared to metal on poly in primary total hip arthroplasty performed because of primary osteoarthritis. So the patient is those who have a total hip because of primary osteoarthritis. The intervention is a durability cup. The comparison is the metal and pulley standard cup, and the outcome is overall risk and specific risks. So that's the PICO type of asking a research question. So then we go to this maybe boring part of the manuscript, but it has really to be done properly. Materials and methods. And what is an easy thing for you is that you can copy and paste from your research protocol. All of this has to be in your research protocol. So then it's very easy. Study design, retrospective, prospective. Are you reporting on consecutively collected data? Again, include the guideline you have used for reporting. You have to write which kind of guideline you have used. If you haven't done this before, find a good example you can use from another study which has been published, and then of course you have to rewrite so it's fulfilling your study design. The patient group, it's so important that you have very well-defined inclusion-exclusion criteria, and also for the control group, if you have such one. The intervention has to be described, outcomes, specific time points for the outcomes, primary, secondary, exploratory outcomes, data source, where have you the data from, which hospitals, databases, and again, time periods are very important to include, so the reader will know from which time period you have collected your data. The methods has to be clearly defined. You have to use validated methods. Don't develop any method yourself, and support the method you have used with a reference. That's so important. Don't develop your own methods. Ethical discussion, ethical considerations has to be included. And I believe that there are many local guidelines for this. You have, of course, to use your own local guideline. Regarding statistics, sample size calculation, there are websites where you can consult and do it. And if you're not familiar with it, you have to consult a statistician and discuss the sample size calculation in your project group. The same with statistics. If you cannot do it yourself, consult a statistician, get it done, so you can do your research section without any problems. So now you have done your material methods, which was a copy and paste from your research protocol. Then for the results, report on your aim. Do not develop any new stuff. You can describe your included patients, demography, baseline data, and then a short description of results supported by tables and figures. And do not do both table and figures on the same result, only tables or figures. No discussion in results section, that has to be in the discussion part of aim or described in methods. Okay, now we are ready for discussion. Many journals do have a guideline for how they want to have a discussion, so please read that carefully. If not, I think this way of doing is suitable for the most journals. I have used that for several publications. Start with what the aim of the study was and what the study showed. Next, give the limitations and strengths of the study you have done. Every study do have limitations and every study do have some strengths. It's important that you are honest and report what you believe are limitations and strengths. Then you have to discuss the major findings and compare these findings with literature. To only do that with your outcomes. And then you have to discuss if the findings are of clinical significance or maybe only of statistical significance. This is important that you know that there are differences between clinical and statistical significance. And if there are discrepancies in the results compared to literature, you have to try to explain why. That's also very important. Then you end up with a conclusion, and you can only conclude on your aim. You might have a primary, secondary, and some exploratory aims, and only conclude on these. When you have done that, you might have some perspectives, implications of your findings, and there might be some unanswered questions which you believe might be ideas for new for future research. So now when you have done this, you are ready for doing your abstract. And please remember that the abstracts is often the only part of the study that will be read. So you have to do this carefully. You must not include any information that is not in the manuscript. And please write the aim and conclusion as it is in the manuscript. I have seen many manuscripts where the aim and conclusion has been changed a little, which might be quite confusing. So, how should you end? You should end by preparing the manuscript for submission. And prepared for submission is that it has to be revised several times. You have to send the manuscript to all co-authors to have their acceptance for submitting the manuscript. It might change several rounds to have this done. Many manuscript needs a language revision too. If English is not your mother tongue, it might need that. It costs only around 50 to 60 dollars, so it's pretty cheap. So when you found that this manuscript is ready for submission, you read again the guidelines and then you revise the manuscript again. For sure, you have forgotten something, and the editor will be a little frustrated if you have not followed the guidelines. So please do that. Once again, read it. So that's all, folks. Submission is ready. Good luck and thank you. This is some charted where you can find the charted journal websites. Thank you.
We have to respect rules, but however, we are looking for publishing new data and meaningful data. And this is why good journals that share very important data have impact factors of over 40. And that's why we are trying to present meaningful information. So actually, what I see, I do this work since now almost 15 years. I was working with the European Journal for Orthopedic Surgery and Trauma, and now with International Orthopedics. that we want to display data resulted from experience. We want to display data that is true, and we want to make our authors happy, notorious, and give them more competence in what they are speaking about or they are writing about. And also, as Professor Overall was saying, we are helping young authors to understand better, because actually whoever wrote a paper knows more than the guy who was standing near him and watching him, or just reading the paper. So the person that was involved actively in the research knows much more than the person who was just watching. So the knowledge is something that we acquire with work. And when you want to publish a paper, you have to define what you want. Actually, you think about who will read the paper, who will listen to your talks, who will listen to your teaching, and why should someone read your paper. Then you have to address to the journal that will have the public trained for your type of research. You will not send your paper about dental tumors to an orthopedic journal or to a neurology journal. So your research have to be addressed to the people who are reading this type of research, and you are looking for them actually when you are looking to the journal. So when you do your research for the literature, you have to know that now, like 10 years ago, PubMed was the first provider of data for literature search, and now Google and Google Scholar represent more than 40%. So our way of doing the research about publications changed. There are some other engines, very powerful, coming from countries like France, who developed the Pascal system that is quite competitive. Turkey, that have a system that is working very well, and China, who developed the CINAMED, that's a very powerful engine of research based on the same types of research on the keywords that actually works for PubMed. And this type of algorithm will let the people know that you produce something original. So when you write a paper, you have to look for what the result of your paper will be, after, of course, respecting all the steps that were recommended by Professor Overland. So now you know that, like our colleague Fatih was explaining, Professor Kusugdumaz is a young professor who's very active and writing many papers. And of course, we are involved actively in writing, but also in reviewing papers. So you know that an editor have not the same exactly point of view as the author, because the author wants his paper published, and now the pressure on the authors increased a lot. Now many countries have rules that include in obtaining the academic degree to publish a paper in a journal that have a high impact factor or included in the index of science, which is something that is quite debatable, because some of those institutions or countries do not have the standards necessary to produce this type of science. However, they ask from their researchers to publish quality data that will result in some unsolvable problem, that either those guys will leave the country to go do their research somewhere else, or ask from help from some other researchers, or they have to adapt or to travel to get this paper in the standards that will allow to be published. So A paper that you want to be published should be, first of all, true. Then it have to be pleasant to read, and it should be attractive. And we have to be knowledgeable. That we have to know that the peer review is the rule for all the scientific journals, and the expertise of the authors comes with writing, but also with reading and reviewing papers. So, as you can see, there is a high interaction between the publisher, reviewer, authors, and all the other factors that will be producing literature. And when the author thinks about the editors and the publisher, you have to accept that publishing is dependent on the quality. That's why some journals have it's dependent on the type of research they publish and on the quality of papers they accept. This is why the evaluation is key, and this is why the peer review process. So the editor have to decide, and this is very important, if the paper is good for the journal, and if the paper is not good for the journal, he have to reject it very fast, because he can offer the author the opportunity to submit somewhere else. He should also check if the ethical criteria are fulfilled, because we are speaking more and more about ethics. So you have to be careful with ethics, and there are books written about that. We can read about ethics, and there is a committee about ethics called COPE that is doing a very good job, and we can read their data on the internet. Now, the reviewers are very important because they provide our view from outside. So editors send to reviewers, authors are also reviewers. Basically, if a reviewer is making some 10 good reviews, he is probably good enough to publish a paper. So that's some simple calculation from our journal. We see that good reviewers actually are also quite good authors, and they understand much better if they do a quality review, because like that there can be also better judges for their own papers. So the papers are different. As you know, there are some original research papers can be like review papers or meta-analysis. There are instructional course lectures and reviews, and there are descriptive papers on techniques, procedures, protocols, and different types of research. And they can be classified, as you see, in clinical studies, original briefs, and in vitro research on animals, research, and anatomical studies. So those research papers can be also differentiated by the type of test we are providing: mechanical, biological, experimental, in vitro or in vivo. And also the author have to be clear with the method he's using. So the methods have to be respected. They also can be created. However, when a method is created, they should be validated. So validated by the authors or by some external sources of knowledge. So there are also invited papers when a journal invites some notorious author who was already familiar with publishing, who wrote a lot, to display a good quality paper about the subject that is controversial or is hot. We do this usually in special issues when we invite people who are good in a field of expertise to provide recent data for their own research. So valuable papers can be helped by editors if really they think that this paper will make a better journal, if they think that this paper will be better for the readers. This is why only powerful journals are able to help with the time, with expertise, and with people to publish quality research. And the notoriety of the paper is related to the author, is related to the journal, but is also related to impact and citation, because sometimes papers that are coming from small journals are becoming extremely powerful and with lots of citations. And this is the case, for instance, with the first paper published about reverse shoulder arthroplasty, when many journals were not believing in this type of utopia. Some small journals published it, and actually the numbers of citations were very, very important. So you have to see that in the future, you have to understand as an editor what is important and if the paper is original. So the paper is good if it is honest, if it's concise, and if it brings one message. It have to be pleasant to read, you have to be well displayed. And of course, as our colleague was saying before, we have to be careful with the abstract, because in many cases, this is what the engines of research will read. You have to know that many papers are read only by computers, and actually people are going to read the papers if the keywords are matching their field of interest. This is why you should write a good abstract. Very good abstract means something between 250 and 400 words, including a structured analysis of what you performed. As now, the statistics are important. They have to be done properly. They have to be answering some questions. If you are performing research on other papers published or a review. Now, good English is important also, because this is how we get better. So we have to be careful with the expression. Good paper should include meaningful research and be short. The sentences should be short, devise long phrases, and structure the research in a logical frame. Now the computer will do the work with the submission, where all the things are finished. This is ready to go. And then if the paper is accepted, it's a win. If the paper is refused with some clear explanation, you have to adapt your paper and maybe to submit somewhere else, and always improve your paper before resubmitting. Do never forget that when you resubmit, you have to update your references, because for an editor, when we are reading papers with references written 3 years ago, we know that that paper was rejected at least once or twice, and this is a sign that you are not careful with your submission. So if the paper is accepted with some modification, just do it and improve your papers. And these are some references from our journal, and the journal actually should be adapted to what you want. You have to be careful about the journals. Some journals have they publish only by invitation. Some journals publish only specific type of research. There are some metrics that you can read over the internet, like every journal will publish in the first page its impact factor, its immediacy index that is provided by the JCR, the Journal Citation Report. Each journal will include the half-life of citations. That is very important for an editor to adapt. My presentation is almost ready. I was just saying that when you choose and you pick your journal, you have to be careful about the metrics, and they are published in the journal as you see. For me, very important metric is the number of downloads. If a journal is downloaded a lot, that means that people are reading the journal. So you see those metrics are important, and this can give you some information about what is important. So now you know the open access is something that is also new since a few years, and it is becoming more and more popular because lots of people and publishers are pushing this. So thank you so much for your attention. And
through a few of the questions. And we start with what makes a study important, novel, and worth publishing. Well, if you look at what Nature says, Nature Editing, they are the #1 editing group as far as academics go. And they say, a report original scientific research, area of outstanding scientific importance, and reach a conclusion of interest. This is always the problem. It has to be interest to an interdisciplinary readership. So more than one person or one specialty needs to be interested in this particular topic. What about editorial criteria for publication? Well, the only advice I can give you, and this is what Prof. Overgaard and Scarlat have told you, follow exactly the information for authors. If you don't, the article will just simply come back to you. So look at the manuscript guidelines, the file type, the word count. Usually 4,000 words is a maximum anybody can read on one particular topic. The authorship is, of course, important. With your authors, who is first, who is second, who is last? You know that in the university, usually first and last authors are the ones that count the most. What about the title page? Like Marius just told you, make it attractive, get a nice, good title, one that people want to read about. The abstract is most important. End up with bullet points. Some journals, E4 Open Reviews, want bullet points, keywords, figures and tables. If you need to get permission, you as an author have to get the permission. And finally, good conclusion, and of course, a good reference style. The factors to increase chances of publishing. Well, the manuscript has to be in scope with the journal. The quality of writing is within publishable standards. Now, the quality of writing is not an absolute. All journals have editorial staff. And your English, French, German, Turkish, whatever, can be corrected by the editorial staff. So don't worry too much about that. Have great ideas. We'll see about the language. The manuscript must be formatted correctly. The guidelines we've just talked about must be well followed. And the most important thing is, if you submit it, please follow the peer reviewer's comments. Be sure they're correctly answered. There are a lot of articles published in more than 11,000 journals throughout the world. So you do have a huge choice of journals if you look at the last JCR report. Where does orthopedic stand in this great jungle? Well, all the way down here. Our best journals have impact factors of 5 or 6. And you see, our science is an orthopedic science. It's translational research most of the time, and it's very rarely it goes into the ethereal areas of Nature, Lancet, or Cell. However, we speak to each other, we speak for our patients, and it's important to publish because it's the only way we can get our knowledge base to become greater. What is the right paper for the editor's journal? Well, original research, I see it as non-published data to advance collective knowledge. Reviews, which is what we do essentially, is a concentrate of published and verified data to advance knowledge of the individual. You want to know something about a general topic. This is not the same as original research where you want to be very precise and specific in a more general topic. Common mistakes for authors. Why do you get your manuscript sent back? Well, abstract writing is not writing abstracts. Or if you prefer, the abstract must be the best part of your article because that's the one most people will read. Never underestimate the introduction. It must be well written. People would want to read it, and it has to be less than 10% of the total length of your paper. An article that lacks coherence or focus is not so good. Too many references, that's no good. It's useless to go back to biblical times and up. Complicated bar and line graphs, nobody understands. Avoid those. Poor quality illustrations, photographs that look like pizzas instead of looking like operative fields. And then inconclusive conclusions that do not really window what you were saying before in your perfect abstract. Are there potential biases of editors, and how can they be managed by authors? Well, there's lots of potential biases. And for instance, there are journals who will only accept articles with positive results in comparison with those with negative results. Some of the journals have problems with a country, with an institution, or with an author. There are gender issues. In a journal, have you ever asked yourself how many of these authors are diverse? How many first authors are women in what you publish? That's a moot question and a hot topic today. Commercially sponsored articles have a great acceptance rate if you look at the New England Journal published. Copyright issues. Well, copyright issues can have consequences. And if you don't follow copyright issues, you may end up facing jail time, just like this young fellow here who found the thesis, copied it, and sent it to a friend of his, and the guy who wrote the thesis found out. Copyright agreements are anything but fair. As authors, we sign them by coercion. Either you sign or you don't get it. It's just like in the internet. If you don't accept, you don't get into the website. Our journal, for example, E4 Open Reviews, publishes manuscripts under a Creative Commons attribution, which allows others to reuse the work without permission, so long as the work is properly referenced and the use is non-commercial. And many, many journals work that way. If you look at Elsevier, what are the rights? Well, the rights of the publisher is the exclusive right to publish and distribute the article in any form that they want, including iPhone use or tablets, etc. They also say that the authority is to reinforce the rights in the article on behalf of an author against third parties. For example, in the case of plagiarism. Now, be very careful with that because it includes auto-plagiarism. If you take an article or illustrations, pictures, graphs, whatever, of something that you've already published, you cannot use it in a new and an other article. You will be infringing copyright rules. The reviewer selection. Well, this is what it looks like for most people, right? You try to get through this crowd to finally get it accepted. There are two ways to review. There is the single blind reviewers. Some journals have anonymous reviewers who know the authors. Other journals have double blind review where nobody knows anybody. The reviewers don't know the authors. Single blind reviewing confers a significant advantage to papers with famous authors. So this is one of the biases that we have to look for. What about selection biases? Well, there's lots of biases there, and I think you should go and read that article in Nature to get some more information. The acceptance rate should be stable in a journal out of scope or poorly structured research projects will be rejected. Poor data, as Marius and Søren have said, cannot be improved. A review, although, can always be improved through hard work. I see it like a statue. You can work on it until it's perfect. So thank you for your attention.